There's a village nestled deep in the Austrian Alps, untouched by time. It's a place few speak of and fewer still dare to visit. Known to locals as Geistertal or Ghost Valley, the village is rumored to harbor a secret, a darkness hidden behind its picturesque facade. I first heard of Geistertal from a travel blog. The post described it as a hidden gem with stunning landscapes and architecture dating back to the 17th century. The photos were enchanting: cobblestone streets, charming wooden houses, and a grand ballroom that seemed out of place in such a small village. As a travel photographer, I couldn't resist the allure. The blog's author warned that the village was difficult to find and that the locals were peculiar, but I chalked it up to exaggeration. After all, who wouldn't be wary of strangers in a place so isolated? It was late autumn when I arrived in Austria. The air was crisp, and the leaves painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. I rented a car and followed the blog's vague directions, which led me up winding roads and through dense forests. By the time I reached Geistertal, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows over the village. The streets were eerily quiet, and the air felt heavy, almost suffocating. As I parked my car and stepped out, I noticed something strange. There were no sounds. No birds, no wind rustling through the trees, not even the distant hum of life. It was as if the village existed in a vacuum. The first person I met was an elderly woman sweeping the steps of her home. She stopped when she saw me, her eyes narrowing. "Guten Abend," I greeted her, but she didn't respond. Instead, she stared at me for a moment before retreating inside, slamming the door shut. Shrugging off the cold reception, I wandered through the village, snapping photos. The architecture was stunning, just as the blog had described. But as I reviewed the shots on my camera, I noticed something odd. In every photo, the buildings appeared slightly distorted, their angles sharper, more menacing. And in the windows, shadows loomed where there should have been none. Night fell quickly, and I realized I hadn't booked a place to stay. The blog mentioned an inn near the center of the village, so I made my way there. The innkeeper, a wiry man with deep-set eyes, greeted me with a forced smile. "You're staying the night?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. He hesitated, then handed me a key. "Room 7. Keep your curtains closed." The warning unsettled me, but I didn't press for an explanation. The room was simple yet cozy, with a large window overlooking the village square. I closed the curtains as instructed but couldn't resist peeking out. The square was empty, save for a single figure standing in the center. It was a man in a black suit, motionless, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. He stood there for hours, unmoving, until the clock struck midnight. At the stroke of 12, music filled the air, a haunting waltz that seemed to come from nowhere. I pulled the curtains open and my breath caught in my throat. The square was now filled with people, all dressed in elegant 18th century attire. They danced in perfect synchrony, their movements fluid yet unnaturally stiff. And their faces, they had no eyes, no mouths, just smooth, featureless skin. I stumbled back from the window, my heart pounding. The music grew louder, more oppressive, until it felt like it was inside my head. A knock came at the door. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No response. The knock came again, more insistent this time. I approached the door cautiously, peeking through the peephole. There was no one there. But the knocking continued, relentless. Summoning my courage, I flung the door open. The hallway was empty. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft and chilling, coming from behind me. "Dance with us." I spun around, but the room was empty. The music outside had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. I grabbed my camera and decided to leave. As I stepped into the hallway, I saw the innkeeper standing at the far end, his back to me. "Sir?" I called out. He turned slowly, his face blank and featureless like the dancers outside. Panic set in and I ran down the stairs out into the night. The village was dark and empty, but the oppressive feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I made it to my car and started the engine, but the headlights revealed something that made my blood run cold. The villagers stood in a circle around the square, their eyeless faces all turned toward me. I floored the gas pedal, speeding out of the village and down the mountain road. The music followed me, faint at first, then growing louder as if chasing me. When I finally reached the highway, the sound stopped. I pulled over, my hands shaking, and looked back. The road behind me was empty, the village nowhere in sight. Back home, I reviewed the photos I had taken. Every image was warped, the buildings twisted, the shadows in the windows unmistakably human-shaped. But the final photo was the most chilling. It was a shot of the village square, taken from my window. In the center stood a single figure, staring directly at the camera. It was me. They say no one leaves Jakarta unchanged. Some never leave at all. And though I escaped, the haunting melody of that soundless waltz lingers in my dreams, calling me back to the dance.